Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacky Cheng, not to be mistaken by Jackie Chan, like the other martial artists, because for many years I tried to strike people off from saying Cheng instead of Chan. But anyway, I'm cool by association. If you have to call me Jackie Chan, so be it. Pretty cool. Now, I'll give you like a good 10 seconds to read what I have on the wall. I'm not going to read it out to you, but I want you to particularly highlight the text in red. All right, different folks need different strokes. What do I mean by that? Now, just a bit of history about myself, where I come from and what do I do and all that. This is obviously a picture of me when I was younger, back in 1983, all looking sassy and ready to go with a little briefcase as well. Never mind a hairdo, that was 1983. Anyways, now, English is not my first language. English, in fact, is not my second language. It is, by far, the fourth or fifth language. I grew up in Malaysia, from Kuala Lumpur, and to survive in a country with multilinguals, I need to have all these languages, basic languages in hand. That includes the dialects of Teochew and Hainanese from my dad's clan and from my mom's clan. Now, the expected competency for me is, aside from school grades, it's be able to speak all these languages. Now, but mind you, English language itself, it's taught, 3.5, 4 hours a week at school. So you don't really get a lot of that practice. So now, if at any point I don't make any sense, please stop me, and I'm happy to readjust my tone or even, explain to you further, because English is not my first language, but I'll try very hard for that. Now, throughout the years, as I go on and I, finish school, blah, 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 I went on to Sydney. I finished off my final 2 years in architecture. So I'm actually a competent spatial artist, if you might say that. And then later on, I went on to become a competent visual artist. So that's my actual trade. Everyone has a trade. And then I went on to become a competent visual arts trainer. Now, that's a very, very exciting role for me, because from the role that I had before as an architect, went on to become an artist, and I took that ideas and all that melted, a fusion of knowledge that I have, and went on to become a visual arts trainer. And I know I'm competent in that because I have a job as a visual arts trainer. But what I didn't know is back in 2006, when I was sent out to Vichydanga, a community 200 kilometers down south of Broome, I wasn't expecting something that was completely out of my tools or whatever I have in my bags, because I thought, I could master English. Or not even master, I could actually, converse with someone and deliver my presentation or deliver the delivering training. I didn't realize that I'm actually not a very competent communicator, because now I'm in a remote community, and what I'm facing here is not just one language, but 5 different language groups, and Creole being the very basic common language that's spoken across the community. I have absolutely no idea of what is going on. So I'm all ready, I've got my bags packed, I've got my tools packed, and everything is jump in the car, 4-wheel drive, drove all the way down to the community, landed in there, no one turned up. Hang on a second, out of my realm. The next thing is, the following week someone turned up, but not knowing that what you're doing. So hang on a second, what am I not doing right here? I don't have my preparation. I didn't have any idea of what am I expecting, because I thought I'm here to train someone in visual arts. Yay, fantastic. Then the whole deja vu moment came back. I remember the first time I came to Australia, I was sitting in a bus stop. Someone walked past me and said, "Hey, how are you going?" And I said that I went, "By bus." Because where I come from, how I learn English is, "How are you?" And you say, "I'm fine." But when someone said, "How are you going?" I said, "By bus." Now, that's not wrong, is it? It's just the colloquialism. It's how you're actually speaking. And then later on, they'll be like, "How's it going?" I'll say, "How's what going?" And don't ask me about when someone says, "Bring a plate," because you know what happened, okay? I literally brought a plate. I didn't understand that. That's for a function. Anyway, so back to communicating with the communities. What happened when you have to actually communicate with your learner, aside from just going through or your Aboriginal liaison officer or even talking to industry and stakeholders. You have to talk to your learners. And your learners are not communicating back to you because, number one, they might not be understanding what you're saying because they don't have the jargons at hand. And number two, well, hang on a second, look at the trainer. You don't have the skills to actually communicate as well. So what's going on here? We're not even meeting at all. You know, we need to fuse, but we're not fusing at all. So now, just some challenges to let you know what the challenges that we have to face. This is not just any challenges, this is remote Kimberley learners challenges. So we have these points here. I'll let you read through. And it's all true. And the very last point of it is that we have it's a real issue for the sector. We have inconsistent trainers. And it means that it's really hard to retain trainers in the Kimberley area. Number one, perhaps, hang on a second. Well, we're not equipped with everything that we need to know in terms of training out in the remote community. And number two, support. Wow, it's really hard when you ask someone, say, you know, how do I get to this community? And you say, well, just drive down the road, and that's it. Really not helping a lot. And number three is the unfamiliarity. Now, that's me. I wasn't familiar with any of the protocols or customs that came with the training as well. But I'm learning on the job, and I'm still learning up to today. Now, let's go back to the trainer's point of view as well. Now, we learn of the learners' challenges. How about the trainers? Remote trainers' challenges in Kimberley. Now, this is a kicker. This is a unique one. For any remote trainers, you will be nodding your head on the other side. Say, yep, yep. Because, yes, we do have the language barriers. I say chicken, you say cow. With some interpretations and the spoken and body language, you know, one of the sessions with students asked me, when I asked the student, sorry, I said, where you going? She just said that to me. And I'm going, okay, all right. So I asked another student, what does she mean by that? She goes, she'll come back. I would never known, you know, this means coming back. And another day I asked a student, where are you going? And I asked her, so she's coming back, right? No, this time it's this. This means I'm going fishing. So how do you differentiate from that, I'm coming back to, I'm going fishing? Hang on, it's just that very subtle of that finger turning into a fist, going around your wrist. There you go. Simple little things that happens that you have to sort of tune into. The cultural unfamiliarity, which is the local customs and protocols. Always try to get to know your local Aboriginal liaison officer because you will thank them so much of knowing just the right person to go to, the person to talk to, know the do's and don'ts, because every community that you go to has its own laws and protocols as well. And of course, there are all these other thin market of maintaining viable students in the classroom. Yes, limited access to community during the wet season. It's wet season is usually a no-go zone in a way because number one is to protect the trainers as well because you don't want to get stuck in it. And number two, it's really, really highly expensive to try to retrieve someone from a remote community when you can't get into during wet season. So there you go. So all in all in a year where we have, say, how many weeks of training? Say, well, 36 weeks of training. For Kimberley, if we're lucky, aside from all the protocols, including bereavements and sporting events or students going out to different communities, you're lucky to get 20 weeks of student contact time. So how do you try to engage with your student given that time that you only have? And of course, for the very last note, you're in a classroom. Have you ever been into a class or a session when someone's yabbering on, like me right now, and all you're doing is, yes, that's what we get. Because you get students just going, yep, just make her stop talking. Yep, I'm just nodding my head. Why? Because she is so highly verbalized that I don't even understand a word that's coming out of her mouth. That's not just giving text, because you have to know who your audience is. You have to know, you have to be able to actually convey to your audience what is needed to be conveyed. Not what you're just going blah, 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 and it just flies across your head. So these are some of the challenges that we face. And of course, there's a lot more of the challenges, but the most common ones are here. Now, a lot of the times when, this is my own experience, a lot of the times that I realize that whenever I go out to the community, even for the first time, This is an example of a student, and we were doing a project together, and she was drawing something, and it was actually beautiful. And I said, that's gorgeous. At this point, we haven't spoken to each other for 12 weeks now. So this is really bad because I'm persevering because I really want this job. And she didn't say anything. And I said, oh, wow, that reminded me of what my grandmother used to, tell me. It's a story of da-da-da-da-da. And she looked up. And she said, tell me more about your grandmother. What's happening here? So I have been delivering, I have been teaching, but I have not been listening. So I haven't tapped into the individual students or learners of understanding where they're coming from. So I haven't given out about myself. All I've come in is, I'm a trainer, I train you in visual arts, and da-da-da-da-da-da. But hang on a second, what do they know about me aside from me being a trainer? Of course, the topic opened up to, oh, miss, have you watched Border Security? And I say, yeah, what's that got to do with the class? No, tell me why your countrymen like to bring in all this weird food. And I said, whoa, okay, that's a good question. But you know what's happening here? We're actually generating conversation. And from those conversations, we're actually generating to different ideas and different creative learning strategies. So it's not just understanding what you know how to teach them in that context, but also understanding how to tease the best out of them to open up to learn from you as well. So this is a two-way communication. And then soon enough, later on, I learned how to code switch. Now, this is not a foreign word at all. In fact, I've code switched since as a young kid. Remember the first slide that I showed you about, learning all these Bahasa Malaysia, Mandarin, Cantonese, English, and then, Hainanese and Teochew? I've been code switching since I was born, pretty much. The moment I could talk, I've been code switching. When I talk to my grandmother, it would be in Teochew. When I talk to my maternal grandmother, it would be Hainanese. Then I talk to school teachers, and it would be Bahasa Malaysia, and then to friends, be in some English and Cantonese and Mandarin, everything mixed up. So I have been code switching, but I didn't realize this term is so important in my delivery, in where I do what I do. So code switching, for many of you might be aware of it, is actually, it occurs in bilingual speakers. So say, for example, if your native background is German and then you're in Australia, you might know a bit of a German words here and there and you go, oh yeah, okay. But then it depends on your audience, right? So my students, they speak not just English, Creole, they speak 5 different other community languages as well. So I took on the challenge of learning Creole, learning how they communicate, to understand where they're coming from so I can deliberately learn more from them and say, okay, I'm going to learn what you just said so I can pass on the message to you via what you said to me. So that's what we did. I learned that S is for J. So if I let you go on with that, if snake becomes Janaik. Now I say it in a very posh way of Janaik. What is that? Janaik. Father, butter. So go on, the list goes on. Now let's just try this common translation, okay? If in English we say, I'm going to the shop, they would say, I'm going job. Now if a first-time person would listen to this, you go, I'm going job. I say, sorry, what was that? I'm going job. I'm going, sorry, say that again? How embarrassing it is someone, it really devalues that learner's ability to actually bring out the confidence in actually communicating with you. Because, well, hang on a second, I haven't really learned much about what she's trying to say to me. Next one, I'm going over there. I'm going over there. Oop. The third one, wake me up early in the morning. This is a good one. Waking up me at Urbala. So these are some of the examples, very common examples that I've heard throughout the 7 years that I work in communities. Because now when someone says something, I go, oh, yeah, okay, I know where you're coming from. And someone says this, I'm like, yeah. I'll just nod my head. When someone says this, I'll say, yeah, all right, see you next week. Yep, no worries. Spoken language, common language here and there. Now, you try this. Try to decipher what this might mean. Just in your head, that's all right. It actually says, go on, take this tucker to the baby. But in your head, does that sound like what it means? Now, what we've just experienced is obviously a two-way learning. So let's recall from what I said before about how as the learner and the trainer, they both have to tap into each other and learn from each other's way. So if you go into a classroom, you understand the students that, the students might not even understand clearly what you're trying to say, it's because you as a trainer, haven't really tapped into the world of what the student's trying to say to you. So individualize the students, not actually segregating it, but actually spend some time with individual students and understanding where they're coming from, what they're trying to say. Because then if you do value individual learning, even value the learner's home dialect or language, what is the learner actually saying this? They're actually saying, yeah, this train is deadly, right? Now, if you eliminate highly verbalized communication or even written communication, simplify things so that they understand it, teach them what they need to understand in the industry, and when they get it, they're saying, this train is deadly, because I get it. And of course, if you have activities that encourages code switching, what they're saying. Thank you very much. They're saying, this train is deadly. Now, I'm not specifically saying I'm the trainer. I'm specifically saying for all the trainers out there, if you understand these core values of actually tapping into the learner's point of view or where they're coming from, they will get you. They will respond to you. Now, one of the activities that encourages the code switching method, we did in one of the sessions and the Remote Community Arts Center where we one of the units is to do customer service. Now, I brought props, outfits and props and everything. I thought, okay, we're going to do customer service today because we're going to pretend that this is an open shop. So students have to, if I'm going to come in and you don't know who I am, what I am, which country I come from, but you have to try to communicate with me. So one day I dressed up as Japanese. I thought, okay, I'll go easy, with the camera. And they go like, oh, yeah, she might be Japanese. All right, came in. And I didn't say a word. I didn't say a single word. And they tried really hard to convince me to look at the artworks and to even understand what they're trying to say to me. And I had to stop them halfway. And I said, look, I'm not deaf. I just don't understand English. So maybe you could try, to simplify your Creole or even English to make me understand what you're trying to say. So over the course of doing all these different code switching activities, they understand that, hang on, what we say may not be necessarily what other people understand as well. So everything is simplified. Another example is we did a phone call exercise. And I said, well, you have to call the supplier and order certain materials because, you're running out of particular materials. So we have a script, and she goes, hello, can I speak to so-and-so? Now, could I order this? How much will it be? And then she forgot a question. She forgot to write down a question. She goes, please hold on. Blah, 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 blah. And she turns back again, and she goes, right, now we have this. So she's just done the code switching because she realized that the other person from the other side might not even understand what she's trying to ask. So she code switched to suit the industry of the language, what she's saying. So we actually did tap on this, and yep, tick. We've done pretty good. Now, in a lot of ways, what we do, this is coming from personal experience as well. There's a lot of, pressure from the trainer because you're finding resources and trying to find different sorts of inspiration. Now, drawing in different inspirations to feed the learning and training strategies, it's one of the most difficult things that you can do because there's so many different tools out there. But in remote communities, you will not necessarily have technology to accompany that. So a lot of times what we do is we go out, we find different ways of drawing inspiration. Like, for example, this is a Nyangmara language. Work means wagam. I've actually contextualized it to suit me, so that working is wagaming. So if someone says, where you going? I say, wagaming. And they'll laugh because they thought it's funny. She just used, a traditional word and put in the English at the end of it to suit her. But this is no disrespect or anything to the language owners. I'm just merely trying to put it in context of what I'm trying to say to them. Now, there's other words like, say, yuguri, that would be green, like grass. So if I were to go out and say, well, this is how I picked up the colors of the landscape. But they might not be able to find the exact colors to explain what it is that they want to do with the painting. Then I say, all right, how about yuguri? Tauyuguri might mean grass. It might mean anything green. It might mean anything that you see that suits the color, that familiarizes them with the color. Or say Miji Miji is red. But then I realized that we made up this word together, which is the brown and Miji Miji, that became Pindan, which is very similar up for us. So this becomes the contextualized words that actually fits in for them. Again, no disrespect. This is just a learning tool or strategy for me to actually understand how to work with the students itself. Now, I know the language and the custom goes very different and very broadly across all Kimberley. So obviously the context would have to be readjusted to suit them. Now, mind mapping. Now, this is an example. What happens if you go to the community where literacy is so low and it's really, really, they really do need a lot of help with that, that writing is not an option for a lot of them. But you know that there is potential because they've done amazing work. They need to go into training. They need to be part of the workforce. One of them is doing mind mapping. There's different ways of doing mind mapping. There's written mind mapping, and there's drawing. Or there's collecting collecting samples, like, from images, found objects, numbers, and words, and spatial awareness, or touching, or anything like that. So our mind mapping it might not even be anything that's drawn or even written. It could be samples from the landscape itself. So if someone trying to actually say, okay, I want to paint that in green, but I don't have the specific green, go out and find the green that you want to paint. Bring all that together and put it together. So that becomes your tool of communication. That's how you actually communicate what you are trying to do. And that brings on to why we're doing mind mapping. A lot of times, like why sometimes someone says, look, I've just been sitting in front of a computer for 3 hours. I really want to write something now. It's the same thing as someone saying, look, I've been eating with fork and spoon, and if I go to India and everyone is eating with his hands, I want to try eating like that as well. So it does sort of bring you into tapping into your tactile experience, because not only that, you are actually engaging the trainer and the student together and doing something you can focus into, as well as adding energy and developing this two-way learning experience. So rather than just going, okay, this is a piece of paper, fill that in, write that up, do what you need to do, send them out. Let's go on an excursion. Let's find something that you can grab on from the floor, grab on from the landscape, or grab on from anywhere to deliver your ideas and see where you can go from there. Now, I know we do have a lot of time here. We know that one size definitely does not fit all, because in every training that we do, no one student is the same. Everyone is different. Because at that point, if you get a whole room of students going like that, you know you're not doing something. It's either you're not doing something right, or it's either they get it. So 50-50, we don't know that. But if you do contextualize and customize your training, you will find that learners actually adapt better to what you're trying to teach. And you actually create innovative delivery, because then they're learning at the same time. And then, as a trainer, you're learning at the same time and creating flexibility to suit everyone as well. Now, remember the first text that we saw from the beginning? There you go. Different strokes for different folks, because everyone learns differently and everyone receives differently. Why do we say, learning the language itself will help? Because language comes in so many different forms. One is spoken language, one is body language, and the other one is a language of silence, of not saying anything. That's another form of body language. But language itself, understanding just little words. We're not saying, go learn and pick up a whole dictionary and memorize everything. We're just saying, understand where your learners are coming from.
Authorised by the Government of Western Australia, Perth.